That was Tony Braxton. Love me some him. So Darren Beatty, who is with the Trump administration, but he's in public diplomacy now. But he was from the previous Trump administration. He was fired for attending a white nationalist convention. I guess that's not a disqualifier now. But he said, in order for things to run right, you must have a competent white man in charge. That is all. And the problem is that we see so little competency, because what happens is, if you look at the history of a pantheon of American presidents, there'd be very few who were well regarded in history, because they are picked mostly by mediocre white men. And the only people who've been able to vote in every single election, never had their rights or friends bond, is white guys. And they pick guys who remind them of them. And that's why you have this pantheon of unremarkable white men. And what happens when crises happen is there are unremarkable white men who meet remarkable circumstances, and they have no bandwidth. They have no way to control it. They were mediocre in the first place, these extraordinary circumstances, and they're out of that depth. You rise to the level of your own incompetence, and nothing. And a crisis is generally where something extraordinary meets somebody with mediocre accomplishments, mediocre mindset, mediocre bandwidth. And this man has the nerve and the temerity to say you need a competent white man in charge. Well, let's go over some of this country's greatest disasters in industrial and environmental disasters. The 3 Mile Island nuclear accident, one of the greatest. 1989, it occurred under President Carter, a white guy, caused by operator error and design flaws at the nuclear plant. I wonder who designed it. The Exxon Valdez, 1998, happened under President H.W. Bush, white. The captain, Joseph Hazelwood, white, was intoxicated and while driving the tanker. One of the greatest environmental accidents ever. The Love Canal Toxic Waste Canal, 1970s, initially exposed under Jimmy Carter, who was white, by the toxic dumping, but the toxic dumping was done by the Hooker Chemical Company, led by white executives. Transportation and structural flaws. Hyatt Regency Walkway collapse in 1981 took place under Ronald Reagan. I guess you'd say he was a competent white man. Engineering flaws led to deaths of 14 people. I guarantee you not one black person was among them. The IW 35 West Bridge collapse 2007 happened under George W. Bush, a white. A poor design and a lack of maintenance led to its collapse. I wonder who that was. The Challenger space shuttle in 1986 occurred under Ronald Reagan, white. NASA officials ignored engineer safety warnings. The Columbia space shuttle disaster 2003 took place under George W. Bush. NASA failed to address a known issue during takeoff. Economic and financial scandals, savings and loan crisis 1980s to 1990s happened under Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Reckless banking practices caused economic collapse. The Enron scandal, 2001, took place under George W. Bush, white. Enron's fraudulent leadership, including CEO Jeffrey Skilling and Chairman Ken Lay, white, led to massive losses. The 2008 financial crisis under George Bush, white, caused reckless lending and deregulation by white financial institutions. Not a black person among them. If you want to go into even more modern history, our debacle in terms of the way that the crisis was handled for as COVID, all white guys. It isn't competent white guys we worry about. It's that you so often forget to put in front of it. It's that you every time something, because we know that crises are going to happen. We know that they're going to happen. But what happens is that oftentimes mediocre men with a mediocre mindset surrounded by other mediocre people make bad decisions and make things worse. But what you're trying to get us to believe, Darren Beatty, is that black people are the cause of it. That is DEI, that you need competent white men in front of them. I tell you what, so many of these disasters could have been mitigated or avoided. And I won't even mention Hurricane Katrina, when George Bush thought it would be okay to put a dude, Brownie, in charge of our response in terms of FEMA. All of these things were governed and manipulated and caused by white people. All of them. So where's the crisis that DEI caused? I've said this before. It isn't DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, that has been at the crux of America's problems. It is GCI, greedy, corrupt, incompetent white men. Every scandal that this country has gone through has been helmed by a mediocre white man who was selected by mediocre white men who think competency means white. That's a little note from the GED section. Got a jazz report coming up in 15 minutes. It's the D.L. Hughley Show.